So we go on to our next presenter, Mr. Afra Raymond. Afra Raymond is a chartered surveyor and managing director of Raymond & Pair Limited. Afra is a past president of the Institute of Surveyors of Trinidad and Tobago and past president of the Joint Consultative Council for the Construction Industry, having served between December 2010 and November 2015. The opinions of Afra Raymond are posted at afraraymond.net and are not necessarily held by the ISTT, JCC, or Raymond & Pair Limited. Mr. Raymond.
Right. Good morning, colleagues. It's still morning. And how long have I got? Sure. Great. Thanks. Right. It's still morning. And first of all, I want to thank ISTT for allowing me to make this presentation. I don't take your support for granted. I never did. And I'm actually grateful for it. I thank you for your attention. I'm approaching a very important presentation because the two people who spoke before me spoke on matters of tremendous importance. Cherise, who is a long-time colleague and a respected professional, Cherise spoke on the question of measurement standards, international measurement standards in relation to land, and the development of those standards. Measurement standards, think on it. Colin, who's a partner from a long time, he was in university with me in England when we were all young men back at the University of Thames Polytechnic. Colin spoke on the whole question of sustainable development for the small island developing states, which is the acronym we use, SIDS, okay? And here I am to talk about state-owned hotels, which in fact is an amalgam of those two things. We have two important recent things to talk about, which I'm not going to dwell on, but I would mention that at the end of the budget, I think it was the morning after he gave the budget, it was Tuesday morning, Minister Imbert, first of all, there are no slides. I said, oh, I'm looking for my slides. This is what you'll, this is it, okay? There have no slides and things, no map and photograph and diagram and things. So Minister Imbert spoke the morning after the budget. That was Tuesday morning, the 8th of October, 2019. And Minister Imbert told us that the Apple Leisure Group was going to be the new management company for the Tobago Magdalena, which used to be called Hilton Tobago. So that is a part of the discussion, Hilton Tobago and the Magdalena situation. And Minister Imbert told us, he didn't give us figures, because I guess it's early in the negotiation. He told us that the government has to, the state has to spend some money to fix the property again. And then when it's fixed up, they would hand it over to the new management company. So that is part of the concern I would be trying to engage with. This discussion is taking place at different levels. And of course, the second thing, back in the 15th of January this year, we were told that the Sandals Resorts International, SRI, was withdrawing from the project in Tobago, and because of the negative publicity and the naysayers and all that stuff and so on. But I don't think they've really withdrawn. I wouldn't be surprised if they come back just now. They're probably looking for another site or something to sweeten it up. But it was very, very sweet. And when something is that sweet, people don't really withdraw. They might say they withdraw to give you a Maggie, but they'll be back. So we have another one coming. Sanders is coming back, okay? So let's talk about it. Tourism, and I'm trying to give this thing a regional context, tourism is important in our region because we have big tourist plant. In other words, a lot of land, some of the prime land, some of the important aspects of construction, real estate, furniture, fittings, and staff training going into these projects. And they consume a lot of public resources, water, electricity, because they have to have a constant supply of water. They have to have a constant supply of electricity. Their sewage has to be treated. Their waste has to be disposed of. And in terms of relating back to what Colin was speaking about, they consume a tremendous amount of environmental capital. That is us as surveyors talking about it. So the discussion is being pursued at two levels. There's a level for us as people in the profession of the land, whether we are land surveyors, geomatics is the word, whether we are quantity surveyors or whether we are valuation surveyors, looking at it as an investment property or an investment prospect to be analyzed, there's that professional headspace, and then there's a constitutional headspace. The discussion is being disclosed through a series of Freedom of Information applications I made. I devised a research program to look into the state-owned hotels in this country. And the conduct of that research program through the Freedom of Information Act allows us to have a certain amount of insight into what is being told and what is not being told about the state-owned hotels. The state-owned hotels are not a matter of small consequence because the 3 biggest hotels in the country are state-owned. So it's not a small thing we're talking about. This building is owned by the state and the land it stands on. The Tobago Hilton we just spoke about, and the Hyatt Regency we can see down on the waterfront. The other hotels in the country are tiny in comparison. So to discuss the state-owned hotels in Trinidad and Tobago is substantively a discussion of the hotel sector in the country. What is decisive in this discussion is the underlying commercial arrangements. And the underlying commercial arrangements are decisive because, literally, because that is the reason that somebody either builds a hotel, doesn't build a hotel, opens a hotel, closes a hotel. Hilton went from Tobago because of the underlying commercial arrangements. They didn't leave Tobago because of the pepper sauce or the high tide or anything. They left Tobago because they weren't getting the required rate of return to talk as valuers and about investment. There was a press release made, Dr. Rowley at the time as Minister of Trade and Industry. 27th of March 2008. He was just about to be fired. He was fired 3 weeks later by Mr. Manning. Dr. Rowley gave a post-cabinet press briefing, 27th of March 2008. And he was speaking about the decision to close Hilton and to spend public money to fix up Hilton and to bail out the private shareholders. And at that time, Dr. Rowley, the then Minister of Trade and Industry, gave us the impression, and I believe he was speaking from a document that was signed and so on. I don't believe it was something he made up. But we had the impression that Hilton was in business with us for 50 years. There was a 20-year agreement and an option to renew for another 30 years, and all of that was being discussed and so on. I have the video. And a few months later, Hilton was gone. If the rate of return doesn't suit them, they can go. There's always a clause that allows them to exit if it doesn't suit them. Because they have a business plan. The question is, do we have a business plan? And let us be clear. The fact that Hilton has remained here, where we're standing, and Hyatt has remained there, down on the waterfront, they're getting the required rate of return. Are you understanding me? If they weren't getting it, they wouldn't be there again. Hyatt would just invoke clause number XYZ and go from here. So they're getting it. The question is, what are we getting in return? Because we put out the money. The Trinidad and Tobago model is a model in which we invest our public money to build these elaborate structures on public land. We pay for designing it. We pay to fit and furnish it. And I can tell you something else. When the buildings are being repaired and refurbished, like what's happening here, $122 million was just spent at Hyatt, we pay that too. Make sure you understand what's happening. It's your money, it's your country. Nobody coming to rescue us here, you know, no Canadians coming down here with a plan to analyze it for us and to help us. They're not coming to help us. We have to understand the thing to help ourselves. Nobody's going to rescue us. No Englishman coming to rescue us. Not even Florida coming to rescue you. Butch Stewart is not coming here to rescue you. He may come in to do something else, but he's not to rescue you. Okay? There are public-private partnerships. To use today's language, there are public-private partnerships. P3. In England, they would call it PFI. Public property and public money is invested, and the private developer, the hotel operator, operates the hotel through a management agreement. That management agreement is the underlying commercial arrangement that we never discuss. So we have endless, and I'm going to be very blunt, meaningless discussions about how many nights a week the steel band playing and who's making the pepper sauce, and who is doing the limbo, and a whole lot of silly things, and millions and literally billions of dollars is passing in these arrangements, and nobody knows how much money it is or what are the arrangements. And I'm going to get into it now. I will demonstrate it. And I will demonstrate why it's a proper matter for concern of a responsible professional organization that concerns land, property investment, and large-scale investment, which are our concerns as the profession of the land. This is not some abstraction. There's a deep constitutional principle at work here. And the constitutional principle is this: we're in a republic where we're all supposed to be equal. Yet, we have a situation where public land, very valuable public land, public money, a vast amount of public money, public time and energy, public servants are involved in these things. I know some of you are spent on these affairs. And yet when you ask, as I have done, for the details of those arrangements, you're told, I can't tell you that because it's private, it's commercial. Now what's wrong with that picture? Let's look at it again. Public land, public money, public resources in terms of public servants involved. But you know what? The entire affair is private. You know why? Because I said so. That's how stupid this is. And it's in the billions of dollars. Nearly $2 billion, for those of you wondering about what's the amount of money, nearly $2 billion are involved in invested in these 3 hotels. So I designed a research program, and that research program was stymied for 2 reasons I'll get into later. And the research program was designed to, in fact, look at these 3 hotels closely, the underlying commercial arrangements. And I did it in conjunction with a group that existed at the time called Disclosure Today and Transparency Lobbying Group, put together by a lady called Margaret Rose, who was a friend and a colleague. Margaret is a friend and a colleague, respected friend. And the 3 hotels are held by 2 state enterprises. So this hotel and the Magdalena Hotel are held by ETEC. And the Hyatt Regency is held by UDCOT. And for those of you who are wondering, let me answer you. The Tobago Sandals that was proposed was going to be held by a next new state enterprise. That's how stupid it was. Golden Grove Baku Limited. So they created a new one. And if they build another one, they'll create a new one again and just keep multiplying the problem. And the actual potential for institutional learning or for us to learn from each other's mistakes is less and less. So even when an outsider, and I don't really consider myself an outsider because I pay all my taxes, even when an outsider like me is asking a question, it's private and confidential and they can't tell you. But it's our money. So, the research program, I used the Freedom of Information Act to interrogate 3 things. The first thing was, I spoke about ETEC and UDCOT as the companies that hold the assets. The first thing was, what are the underlying commercial arrangements? What is the agreement? How is the agreement being honored? The second thing was, I asked Corporation Sole, which is the Ministry of Finance, where are the audited financial statements for these companies? And the third thing I did, because I had certain information, I asked the Board of Inland Revenue, were these 3 companies paying all their taxes? I have information, the answer is no. You see it? Just like the Chinese contract with the housing, where they got the biggest contract in the country, but paying no taxes, just like that. If it's sounding like an echo, it is an echo. Because you saw it before, and you saw it before, and you saw it before. The question is, when is it going to be too much? You see? The questions that UDCOT and ETEC on the commercial agreements were these. I wanted copies of the agreements. I wanted to know how was the management and repair and maintenance obligations discharged. Were there provisions for repair reserves? I know the Hilton Agreement has them because the Hilton Agreement has been published. The Hilton Agreement has provisions for repair reserves. A certain amount of money is taken out of turnover. I should say, ought to be taken out of turnover and placed in a special account. This building is now being repaired. The final cost is likely to be in the region of $664 million. The president of ETEC cannot tell the Parliament when this is going to finish. All of that money came from us. Where's the Hilton Reserve? I don't know where it is either. You see? It's in the agreement. But where is it? We have to spend all the money. There ought to have been money in that reserve to reduce our expenses. There's an embarrassing silence, you know. The brightest man in the world and island scholarships and who passed more islands, all kinds of stupidness. And people could come here and abuse us like this in our own country. It's very embarrassing. What are the provisions in relation to training and employment and promotion of local people? These are not small things. This is a sidebar to ISTT, but I'll mention it. We wrote ETEC that question because the actual agreement for this building, this property, contains provisions that is also proper records kept of training for local people. Yes? What jobs local people were engaged on, how were they promoted, what level did they go to, and so on. We asked ETEC the question. ETEC wrote back and asked us, well, we don't understand what you mean. What do you mean? We asked them the question again. What do the records disclose? Who was trained? What were they trained in? Who was employed? Who was promoted? As far as I know, Hilton only had one Trinidadian manager, Mr. Agito, I believe Agito is his name. As far as I know, in all the years. So he said the Trinidadians are dumb? What is that happening there? They wrote back again to say they don't understand what it means. And we are paying their salaries, eh? Understand it, eh? And this is recently, eh? Since 2016, eh? This is not to do with the bad old days with Camelon thing, eh? So in case anybody getting themselves all thing about it, emotional about it. This happened since 2016. This program started in October 2016, this research program, by myself and Disclosure Today. I asked them, what are the revenues of the hotels? What are the provisions for sharing the revenue? Of course, you know, they couldn't answer that. And I asked what tax concessions they had. ETEC actually took a very surreal position. ETEC basically said that there were no agreements they could share with me and so on and so on. And then I had to point out the Hilton agreement, because I cannot get them a dummy, a shadow. Because the Hilton agreement, this building, has been published. It's registered in the Registrar General's Department. So you write in to tell me you can't tell me two agreements, but one of them is in the Registrar General's Department. So self-evidently, your default position, without even checking the file, because if you check the file, you'd see a registered document. Without even checking the file, your default position is just a position of refusal. Okay? That's what we delimit. Understand it. I then asked them, well, what is this? How it is you could publish the agreement for a 418-room hotel, which is what this is, but you can't publish the agreement for a 198-room hotel? What could be so secret in Tobago? They can't publish the agreement down there. Up to now, they can't answer me. You see? This is what we delimit. UDCOT took an even stranger point of view. And interestingly, of the four organizations we wrote to ETEC, we wrote to UDCOT, we wrote to the Board of Inland Revenue, and we wrote to Corporation Seoul, the Ministry of Finance. The one organization answered really promptly and really professionally, above board. I'll give them 100 out of 100. I didn't like the answer, but I'll give them 100 out of 100, was Mr. Maurice Sweet. He was the PS in finance at the time. And Mr. Sweet wrote back in 3 weeks. They have 4 weeks to reply. He wrote back in 3 weeks. Because I asked him, are there any audits of these 3 hotels? Are there any management reviews of the 3 hotels? And he said, we've never done any. Now that answer has consequences. Because when, about 2 or 3 months after he wrote that, Mr. Sweet was promoted to the ultimate job, where he became head of the public service. He's now PS in the office of the Prime Minister. Dr. Rowley and Mr. Stuart Young went on the road show, the Tobago Sandals road show, talking about how these 3 agreements were working so well. And it was satisfactory. And nobody should panic because Sandals were the same thing. How could you know it was working well if you never measured it? If you didn't audit it? Are you understanding me? And Sweet was in there. So there's a professional question for Sweet. This man is a chartered accountant. He's an ACCA. Did you tell the Prime Minister, sir, we don't know if it's working because we didn't measure it, or did you not? It's a serious thing, you know. We as professionals have to hold each other accountable. This is a project where they're planning to spend $6 billion of our dollars. It stopped, yeah. It stopped because of the naysayers. So Sweet, actually, the one man who answered clearly, showed a spotlight into what was going on. We wrote to the Board of Inland Revenue, and it's very interesting. The Board of Inland Revenue, we wrote to them and asked them, we wrote to the Board of Inland Revenue and asked them whether, in fact, the 3 hotels were paying the correct taxes. It's a very simple set of questions we asked them. Are they paying the correct taxes? Have they filed what they're supposed to file on time? Is there any investigation taking place in these hotels? Have any formal complaints been made about these hotels? And we made it clear in our letter, we don't want any amounts. So if Hilton has a problem, I don't want to know if it's 2.1 million. I don't want any amounts of money. Have they filed what they're supposed to file on time? Are they in compliance? Have they been forced to pay any penalties and interest? Are they being investigated? Are there any formal complaints? The Board of Inland Revenue wrote back and said, they can't answer that because it's confidential. But I'll share something with you all. It was in a newspaper, The Guardian this year, 23rd of May. And the headline was something different, so it didn't concern this. It's buried in the story, but I'll read it with you all so we can understand what's happening in our country, where this is concerned. So the Auditor General of the country, who has the authority to examine any document in law, the Auditor General's Act, she was given sworn testimony to the Joint Select Committee of Parliament. Hey, 23rd of May this year. Auditor General Lorelei Pojadas said her office wanted to obtain information such as VAT and hotel registration listings. Sounding familiar? From the Board of Inland Revenue to track possible revenue loss to the country. Are you understanding me? Possible revenue loss to the country. But was being blocked. The Auditor General was being blocked due to the BIR's law on confidentiality of information. There's more. It's juicy, you know. Pojadas said, hold on, it's not funny. Pojadas said her office was not seeking names or taxpayers' information. That sounds familiar? I asked the question on the same team. And I don't know Mrs. Pojadas. But wanted the information to get a better understanding of the country's financial standing. She was being blocked by the Board of Inland Revenue. BIR Chairman Alison Raphael said BIR's law prevented certain information sharing, saying this could even undermine the tax collection process, whatever that means. In fact, a few months later, the Parliament had a question placed on it by the UNC Senator Tahaka Obika, where he asked questions about the taxes paid and the dividends received by the 3 state-owned hotels. Minister Paula Gopi-Skoon and Minister Stuart Young gave very detailed answers. Stuart Young was a lot less detailed than everybody else, but that's how it is. But Paula Gopi-Skoon and Stuart Young gave detailed answers about the taxes paid by the 3 hotels, which of course raises a very interesting, pregnant question. How could it be? You see, there are a lot of questions coming up here. How could it be that you can't disclose the management agreements to me, which is what ETEC and UDICOT said, and you can't disclose the accounts to me, which is what the 3 of them said, but the Minister of Finance, P.S. Sweet, could tell you there's no accounts? So which one is it? You understand? And I'll go further. With respect to the taxes, the Board of Inland Revenue could write me and say that they're not allowed by law to disclose amounts. They wrote and they told me so. I didn't ask for amounts. They could tell the Auditor General that they can't answer her, but the ministers can go to Parliament and give statements, which were in fact jumbled together to be very misleading. I'm going to leave it there for now. I hope we have some questions. I'd love to answer some. And the work is available at afraraymond.net. You can interrogate the work there. And I thank you for your attention. Thank you.